Welcome back to Cast Me to Hell with me, Seb.
And with me, Robbie.
And this is our Hellraiser 2022 little spoiler-free reaction episode.
Yeah, so it's our initial reaction. If you want to see our full kind of in-depth discussion and thoughts about the film, then we will be going over to So I Married a Horror Fan podcast, and they will be releasing that. But this is kind of a short episode, spoiler-free, just to talk about some of the points of the film and our initial kind of thoughts. So we're not going to be giving away any spoilers. It's just our kind of initial reaction to some of the aspects of the film.
Yeah, so we'll be talking about it, but we will be staying vague on the points. We're not going to give you any of the deaths, okay? Just the basic setups and the basic ideas of what we thought about those without digging into any of the gruesome parts.
Yeah, so
in detail.
Why don't we jump straight into the plot? So obviously this isn't following on as a requel, or this isn't being I got to throw that in there, or this isn't a direct sequel to any of the previous Hellraiser films.
It's a full reboot, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it's a full kind of reboot.
Linking back to the original Hellbound Heart, as what has been said.
Yeah.
Neither of us have read the book, so we can't actually, that's one thing we can't currently talk about. We can't say how close it is to that kind of thing for you guys, but I've heard from reviews that they feel that this is much closer to the original text, even though Clive Barker was the one that wrote the original text, partially just because maybe of the budget that they're able, or the capability of the technology they're able to do today.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, regarding the plot, we've seen Hellraiser take all kinds of turns and twists in it. You know, we've seen Hellraiser in the 16th century, 18th century. We've seen it go to space. We've seen it go, online. We've seen all sorts of Hellraiser interpretations or ways in which the story is being told. For me, I felt that the story and the plot of the film, it was relatively safe. I think there's some twists there which you may or you may not see coming. There was one, the twist itself, I would say it's the only character who I actually kind of liked and found any kind of interesting that a twist happened with. I don't want to give any spoilers on it. What did you think of the kind of overall plot?
Well, to kind of give a short, the main that a lot of people will know, because this is in the standard summary, or if you've seen a trailer, we can dig that deep, but we're not going to go any deeper than that. But it basically is, it still relates to the addiction kind of themes that you do find in the original Hellraiser film.
Yeah,
we have Riley, that's the one. We have Riley. I was blanking on him already, and we just watched it. We have Riley, who is an addict who lives with her brother and his partner, and we know that there's a tension between them in the relationship.
Yeah.
We also have a side story with a kind of, for now, I'm just going to call it a nefarious company or man who is in charge kind of thing. He's kind of a side bit, but that's kind of slowly revealed across the film. So I'm not going to give much of that away. It does add something to the lore of the mythology of the film that kind of adds to it. So it kind of lets it dig a little bit deeper into that kind of mythology that has been referenced in other films, I think, throughout the time. And I'm sure a lot of it has, but I think some of it does kind of make it quite clear for the audience at times, like if you've always wondered what kind of the box and things like that are, you do get some of those answers in this film.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's pretty much that relation to the addiction, which is kind of a link to the box, and there is quite a link throughout the film to that kind of, the idea of the box is almost a representation of the addiction and how it can change and how you can go through it, kind of thing. So we have interesting parts with the box. We have the changing themes, like the puzzle is quite a big part of this kind of one.
Yeah, I think compared to particularly thinking more about the first Hellraiser, is what I would kind of want to compare it to, especially as we covered Hellraiser last week. Cheap plug, go and check it out.
I think most people will be thinking about the original and not thinking about so much about the sequel. Or there's a lot of people like us. We've mentioned we've mentioned some of them, but we have only ever seen. I've only seen 1 to 3, and I think you've only seen the same.
I've only seen 1 to 3.
Yeah,
I've heard about.
So we've heard those. We have heard that they go off the rails.
Yeah.
And from the ones I have seen, this is up there with the better ones. But so sorry, what were you?
Well, one of the things is, in the original, particularly with Frank Cotton and the box, it was all about kind of chasing pleasure and transcending and that sort, that kind of stuff. With this one, we do get more reasons behind the lament configuration. Yeah. We do get an element of more lore about why somebody would go for the box and what solving the puzzle ultimately grants someone, and that that does come into play in the film and is a big driving point for the plot. However, one of my main concerns with the film and the plot in itself was the shift in how the puzzle box works made this film feel a little bit, for me, a bit more by the numbers, if that makes sense. Obviously, this is spoiler free, and we will go into full spoiler territory on So I Married a Horror Fan.
Yeah,
but the story for me and this introduction of lore made the whole film feel very by the numbers in a way. I think that the first act of the film obviously set up quite a lot of the film. The second act was relatively interesting. However, I think for me, by the third act, I feel as if the wheels had come off a little bit. I don't know how you feel.
Yeah, no, I agree that it's actually, when you think of all the parts that were in this, it was quite a straightforward kind of story in a lot of ways. Even the twist you mentioned before, not saying anything like that, but that part is kind of a for some people it was probably quite obvious, and for other people they'll feel like well that's such a, but even if they didn't think about it, there probably was more, because in my case I think I almost didn't think about it because it seemed like it was so obvious that I was like, we're not going to go that way with it surely. So like the way the story played out. But I see what you mean by the third act. The second act, as the horror elements start to really build more, the first act is very much character setup, and very much, as I said, that addiction part is very much a major part of that kind of opening act, and then it involves like a disappearance, to just leave it to that. But by the third act, there is a part of the characters where we get a lot more of the Cenobites. We get a lot more of seeing them. They are very present, like from the mid-second kind of through to the third. And I'd say they're just as present as they were in, say, the original film, possibly more. I think more than they are there. They're more capable of being there. The only problem is that it is one of those things where, as you delve into the lore and you delve into mythology with these films, you sometimes get these scenes where they have long explanations of what they're doing. And there's one in particular with the nefarious man that I mentioned before that I'm not going to dig into, but there's one where that we do have the pinhead or priest, as they go under both names, Jamie Clayton. And we do have that character interacting. I just bracket, I don't know. Because I was like, which one is it? I don't know. I've heard several different names that the character has been referred to. But there's a scene involved with that just felt like it went on and on and on, and it was talking, but it's when someone's saying something in a film and it just starts to go a bit numb in your head, you're just like, yeah, I'm kind of past this now. I'm kind of like, okay, this is, and so, well, I guess while it definitely has some interesting parts, and at that point, I think some of that kind of starts to kind of come away, where maybe the scariness of the Cenobites starts to actually, because we actually start to get a lot of them, it actually starts to get a little bit like, I don't know, there's a mystery of them that starts to kind of come away.
Well, let's move on to the Cenobites then. kind of natural segue.
Let's go to let's start with the big one, Jamie, because I just mentioned her. Jamie Clayton
taking on the role of Pinhead.
Big challenge for anyone to have to do it.
Definitely,
and the backlash that she's like had to take, kind of thing. Which, to be fair, like, and I don't think it's necessarily just because of Jamie Clayton's background. No. I do think anybody taking on the same way Jack Earl Haley got fucking beaten because of his Freddy Krueger, and it's just because people have one set way in their head and they can't move away from it. Like, and again, from the last episode when we did Hellraiser, you mentioned yourself that, you understand from one point because you grow up and you kind of love the character in that, it's like that version of it. But then at the same time, I would say this is a much higher profile than a lot of the sequels, but although people don't like them, I don't think the people who took over from Doug Bradley previously got the shit that she's been getting, which is bad because anyone who actually watches it, she's one of the highlights of the film.
Yeah, I think so.
From what she gets to do.
My thing with the Cenobites was, when we get some introductions to the Cenobites. So when the Cenobites, or when the Cenobites are introduced at the opening of the film, obviously with a film you're going to get an opening kill, so that's relatively, I thought that was cool. And then when the puzzle box, the lament configuration is first getting played with, and we get drips and drabs of the Cenobites, certain shots, voices, that sort of stuff, I thought they were a lot more effective. By the time we got to the third act, there was stuff that I did like about the Cenobites in particular, and Jamie Clayton's Pinhead in particular. There were things that I did like about them, but I felt that they looked very clean almost.
Yes,
which I'm unsure how I feel about that.
That was the part of me I kept looking at. It is a case of, so this is the part where I have heard that is much, the way they look in this film is much closer to the description that Clive Barker gives in the original story.
Yeah.
So they are this kind of stripped and kind of the white bear. And obviously in the original, we kind of had with Pinhead and the Chatterer and Blubberball and
the Bent.
Yeah. all of them, all of them that kind of, a lot of those names were more made by audiences than they were by actually the people that made the film. But obviously they had the white skin and they had that, but a lot of it had to be covered over with more of that leather kind of bondage looking stuff, because they couldn't make all of the body stuff that was described in the original. And it's an odd thing in my head now that once it's the idea that like now they can show it and now they can have all those parts, but it's an odd idea that actually now I'm looking at it, I kind of liked the less is more approach, I think, in my head. Now I'm looking at it, it's like, it's not that they don't look cool, but there's something so pale and white about the whole like features that it almost looks to me like, it almost looked like as if I was looking at an action figure and not looking at actual person that's been torn apart.
Yeah.
Which is odd, because I would say, such as with some of the body horror in the original, to me it actually looked like the skin that was pulled apart. Because of where they are, it kind of, again, it reminded me of like a waxwork, which I get it kind of, I think it is kind of meant to have that kind of version of it.
Yeah, I think it's either going to be that I watch it back, or potentially if we get sequels made by David Bruckner or following on from this, and we see the look more, I might get used to it. I don't know, but it's quite a contrast to it. And it does, like you said, they almost have that action figure feel to them. And I think we got a bit too much of them, I think, in terms of when once we'd kind of seen them, there was a scene in where somebody is lying on a merry-go-round, as we say in the UK. I'm not sure what they call them in the US, the rest of the world.
Like in a park, basically. In a park, you spin it around, whatever. There
was a shot where we saw one in that. I thought it was really cool. And there was a scene in a hospital, which I thought was extremely well done. And for me was the highlight with the Cenobites. But then they got to be towards the end of the film where I was kind of thinking, is this? It didn't make sense.
See them so much. We
so
see
much.
them so much, and they become a little bit more like the monsters that are chasing someone, which I don't remember them ever feeling like in the original. That they're kind of just the monster that's following someone.
Yeah.
I know that they are chasing them, but that's kind of what made them different, is the fact that they could appear in any way. So there's no real point in trying to run away from them because you can't. But this time it felt like they were creatures you could run away from.
Yeah.
And that makes them less scary to
Definitely.
me. I think there was and there's more of them than we got before.
Yeah.
Which, again, I don't think a lot of them, I looked at them and was like, I think you would have been fine by just focusing on these core couple, like the core four in the original. Is it four, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the four.
I think that does take away from it a little bit when you've got, all of those, all these creatures. And in one way, yes, they do look cool, but in another way, like I said, action figure, there was just something so plastic about it. And like you said, clean. It wasn't as dirt. Like, if I was going to have it, I'd probably liked it to be a bit more like real. Like, it looked more like it looked more like fresh flesh instead of waxwork flesh, if you see what I mean. Like, it less of that kind of feel to it. And it might be the way that it was originally described, but I do. It wasn't quite what I thought. I do think that Jamie Clayton's looked the strongest of the bunch when you actually got to look at the details, the way that the skin is kind of like, literally the lines are actually like deep embodied and split up, and the body that looked good, but hers looked a little bit more pink, a little bit more fresh compared to some of the others, which looked really quite. And then, so, some of them just where it was like skin, and it were, whatever I don't know what it's called, but whatever the one with just the skin head like this attached around a frame, which basically just skin pulled tight.
I kind of liked that one.
Like, he looks kind of cool, but he never. It's not a character. He didn't really do anything. He was just kind of there. He kind of had a look. But again, this is why, like, because they all had like different features, but I can't say I found anything individual about them.
Yeah.
Whereas in the original, I felt even just from looking at them, I could tell the individual personalities.
Yeah.
I couldn't really get that here.
No.
There was no personality much to them at all, apart from the priest / Pinhead or whatever it is.
Yeah, we'll just call him Pinhead.
I was going to say Pinhead.
The one thing that I did think was actually very strong in the film was a good sense of atmosphere. Whilst there weren't particularly points where I was terrified. There was some very creepy scenes, like I mentioned, the hospital scene in particular. I was like, oh fuck, man, we're going to get into it now. And there was certain, for instance, it had a really good, brilliant soundtrack to be very orchestral and very reminiscent of Christopher Young's original score. I don't know whether he came back for it, and what I liked is that the Hellraiser kind of classic theme that we're all quite used to was used very sparingly, but when they did use it, it was at the right points, and it kind of made the film feel very grand and very epic in moments. And for instance, one of the things that I loved that I think this did kind of take from the original and kind of kept in the same vein is when the puzzle box is, or the lament configuration, whatever we're calling it, when it's opened, we do see, walls drift away. I know I'm looking at the wall over there expecting it to open. We do see walls, kind of drift away into the distance.
That was one of the bits I thought was the most effective. The way they used the surroundings and made it feel like a real depth of things moving away from them or breaking under them, or the ground changing. And that's when we kind of see the Cenobites appear. We have a lot of this kind of changing around in this kind of and linking in with that kind of addiction part of this kind of, they go into a kind of haze like after it, as if it is like its own kind of, it's an attack, but it's kind of like its own drug, and they're kind of lost in this hallucination. And the whole hallucination part of it, I did actually really like to add kind of, it added a real sense to it.
It feels very ethereal. It feels like you're going somewhere else. And for instance, in the the hospital scene, I don't want to yet again give too much away, but in the background, we see one of the hospital walls kind of disappear. And then we see something, and it looks amazing. Another one of the highlights for me was there was a scene in a car, and the back seat stretched out.
Oh yeah,
and then
well,
came
the
into
van,
the van, yeah. And then the kind of back of the van stretched into this long tunnel,
yeah.
and that was
That
beautiful.
bit was really good. Like, yeah, the like that was part of like a mansion kind of scene that's in the film. And again, and that setting again is part of the thing that's in the, like, as we said. So I think that all of those were really effective, and as you said, like it's about the second act or late in the second, when we get that probably early second act.
Probably early
second act. About midpoint, I'd almost say, for the film maybe, but it's so effective and they're so well used in that scene. But 1 second,
so it's beeping, isn't it? It's not just my ear, but no, it is. It's really effective and well used in the scene, and it has this ethereal dreamlikeness to it. Carry on. covered.
There we go. Yes, apologies for that. So, but it does again. All of these effects do link to the fact that it works really well when the Cenobites are used in this sparing way.
Yeah.
However, this is also why when we get towards the end, I felt like a lot of these really cool parts that were scary actually disappeared. They didn't actually use much of it as it got towards the end. And it started to feel more like a monster kind of chase kind of thing. So and that's what and you will see what I mean. And that's not a spoiler to say that it feels a little bit more like that. And it does become a point where I do kind of wish that there was a little bit less, actually. I think I would have been happy if it stayed on the theme that it was going through about midway through, where people just continued, instead of chasing what the film kind of chases, a slight mystery around like certain characters and where they've gone and what's happened to them in different forms. And I think that is the part that kind of, like, although it's interesting at first, there's not a full payout to it. I don't think there's enough of a payout, and it doesn't mean that lots of it doesn't work in some ways. But yeah, there's definitely something from and to just say on the kind of the gore factor of it all and the scare factor, there is something there were points early on where I could feel the kind of tension in the building, and it did feel like that died down a little bit by the third act, even though there were certain characters I wanted to, I was a little bit invested to be like, I hope that character's safe and things like that, maybe. But I would say we do get some really cool kind of gore.
Oh yeah.
We do get some good fare, although again, the word you said earlier, safe. I felt like sometimes they did a little bit, but I was like, come on, this is Hellraiser. Let's push it a little bit. Like it felt like it cut off at times, or we could have seen more deaths. Instead we just hear screams, or we just hear, and I don't know why. With certain franchises, I would be like, yeah, I completely get that. I don't know. I just felt like I felt at times it held back a little bit. Actually, there is some real gore in it. I'm not saying there's not. There is plenty in there. But there were just a few when I was like, you could have gone just that extra step. There is some really where you see like skin slice away from flesh and those kind of things. But it was just like a little bit, and I was like, let's see it. Come on, let's see a bit more. Let's just not have that person disappear again, because it does feel like with each one that comes, it happens, but then it just kind of pulls them away just before like the good. And I felt like there was not I didn't feel like there's anything that matched to that Frank of the original kind of proper, like slowly pulling apart. I didn't quite get one of those that I was expecting to come.
No, I don't. And I think going with the gore, it feels almost borderline. It almost felt as if it became kind of like a slasher film at points. And one of the main things for me in Hellraiser particularly, if we're looking at Hellraiser 1 and Hellraiser 2 and even Hellraiser 3, with JJ, I think he's called, or JP or whatever, there's always an element of these characters who are kind of morally ambiguous, or they're not the greatest people. If you think about Frank, as we said in our previous episode, Frank's an absolute shitbag. So his whole thing is the Cenobites looking him for punishment, to punish him. And then Julia is kind of the same, the Cenobites are there to punish her. And for me, the Cenobites are there to punish those who search for them. And it's about punishment for your sins almost. Like JP, I think he's called in the third one, he makes the deal with Pinhead about giving him power, and he sacrifices people to him. So there's always kind of these characters who aren't nice people, and you want to see them get their comeuppance. Now, there was one character in particular, and they got a rather gruesome death. And after that, I was like, "Oh, that's grim." And seeing them go, it's the implication of, well, this is what's going to happen with them. But when it comes to other characters, for instance, in the hospital, in the van, those are the two that come to mind. They just feel like they were kind of characters who were in there, and they get these gruesome deaths just because, if that makes sense. So for me, whilst the effects were good, it was just kind of like, like you said, it played it a little bit safe, played it a bit too slashery in a way for me.
Yeah, I think I agree that there is a kind of. I mean, if I'm thinking of the original, kind of, there are both positives and negatives about the original film that I've had. We've mentioned before about the soapiness of it at times, the slight cheesiness and things like that. But then in a weird way, it wasn't conventional. No. It wasn't conventional in any way, if you see what I mean. So it's odd to say now that we've gone back possibly closer to, not fully to the original novel, because this isn't. I know that that's not exactly how any of this plays out like that. The addiction and the characters are not the same in the original novel, because this has been updated to modern day. But in the original, at least I left it going, that wasn't the film I expected it to be, and I did. And the Pinhead was not at all like I was expecting him to be, because you'd seen him I mainly only ever seen him, but I'd never actually seen him in action. I expected him to be much more of this full-on, like maybe more of that slasher kind of, or maybe more of this full-on, but he's not. He's actually really sparingly used throughout the film in these kind of, but they stand out when he was there. When he actually appeared, it was like, oh, okay, you're paying attention. And it actually made those other scenes kind of rise because of it. And although I can say that with Jamie Clayton that I do actually like, and I like the voice, and I liked her appearance more than most. And a few of the scenes, there is one such as like on a bridge that happens that I actually quite liked, that kind of the part of it, the kind of, there was a kind of that she kind of tries to lure someone or try and almost trick someone into something. And I liked that part because that felt a little bit more, but there was also so much of it where it felt like, again, even she ended up having to just blend into the background of everyone else. And it was kind of just there. And, and it didn't quite have the impact at times that I think those sparingly used parts of Doug Bradley's original kind of just did. It just hit that way that it was like, okay, like Pinhead's on the screen, I'm paying attention. That's why he became such a cultural icon at the time. Because it was like, he's not even in the original film that much, and yet he is the focal point. He's not even the, Frank is almost more of the main character than Julia, know, and even the main girl, as we said, Kirsty, even in the original, is not there. But in this one, it's very much, Pinhead is not the main character here at all. But it's just, in general, I found that although it's hard to say, because I have been hearing lots of positive things, and I can't say that it's not good. It's not. No, it's good. It's good. It's enjoyable, and but is it because there's such a low bar for Hellraiser? That we'd say that this, in terms of their ones, and because it has such interesting lore and ideas around it, it does still stand out from other horrors. It does stand out from your common slasher or your common supernatural, because there's something about it. But there's even a part of me that's a little bit like, I felt like that S&M kind of part of it was a bit missing.
Yeah, it was.
There is, you know what I mean? Like that kind of, there was none of that. Like there was like one bondage dungeon.
Yeah, I think we saw like two pipings.
That's what I mean. We saw two pipings. And again, and if you listen to our last episode, quite like maybe the first one's a little bit better, but it was still pretty straightforward kind of pipings. I was at first, because we right near the beginning of the film we get like a sex scene pretty early on, and I was thinking, are we about to get a big old mix of like the film's just going to be filled of sex and a sex and then death and things like that. And again, not even that part really. No. Like there was more of an eroticism to the original than there is here at all. Kind of thing. They definitely they bring it to more social themes in this film, and in this mod day and age, that doesn't feel like anything fresh.
No.
You know what I mean? Bringing it to social themes or addiction, I get the idea. And I think one of the things that actually does work in one way is the idea of how the addiction kind of through the character that we see kind of goes on that journey in one way. I get that kind of part. But sadly, bringing in a franchise back and bringing it to modern social themes doesn't actually feel that fresh anymore.
No.
So it didn't make, so for some people this might, it's so fresh because they're so into like the modern way and the modern voice, and they've got modern representations of people. But yeah, so it's just not quite enough to make it feel like it's an extraordinary film. I think maybe it just dipped a little bit below where I quite expected it to be. But midway through the film, I was thinking this might be really good. By the end, I was okay. It didn't quite reach those levels, but it still had lots of good gory scenes, lots of good death that you'll probably be happy with, and it does play out. It just definitely the word I'd heard safe several times from people, and I completely agree. This is a safe Hellraiser film, and with Hellraiser, I don't know. I feel like it shouldn't be safe. It should be unconventional.
Yeah, for me, as being such a big fan of the original too, and even I've got a soft spot for 3 because it's so unconventional and weird. That's it. I think for me, I don't think it's a bad film, and I don't think it's poorly made. I think I don't really care about any of the characters, and
the atmosphere that David Bruckner gives in some of those scenes that we said before, absolutely, like the scenery, it looks really good. It looks really good. The atmosphere, the scenery, the way the walls change, all of those kind of things, those are major positives. It's just a character level, and the Cinnabites.
And it was too long as well.
Cinnabites, I keep saying.
Cinnabites.
The Cinnabuns are coming for you. There is a Don now.
There was a Don. Yeah, there was a Don. We did see a Don.
You get close-up Don.
Yeah, close-up Don. That's the thing for me, is it was well made, but ultimately it was too long. I mean, it's just under 2 hours, I think, if without the credits. And I don't think it needed to be that. And it was just too clean and safe. I don't think it was a bad film, but I think for me, I preferred the third one. I think this would probably be middle of the pack. Do you have anything else to say?
No, as I said, this was just our little reaction. So go over to when we get I believe it's going to be released when we get our UK release of the film. So that's when we'll be sharing. But so look out on So I Married a Horror Fan podcast. Have a check out for that. Keep an eye on them because we will be dropping soon. But also keep an eye on us because we've got a lot of more Halloween content coming up, including next week we have Halloween Ends.
So, as always, we hope you've enjoyed the show. It was just a little, half an hour about our
little taste.
What's your pleasure, sir? So yeah, if you've enjoyed the show, then hit the subscribe button and leave us a lovely review. We will see you shortly. Goodbye.